This is our live event for Heritage Week and Cork Heritage Open Day. And I'd like to send a big warm welcome and big thanks to Jack O'Keefe, who is with us today. So as I mentioned, this is organised by Meitheal Mara. We in Meitheal Mara, we're a community boatyard in Cork City and a maritime heritage organisation. We do lots of different things. We build and repair curraghs and other traditional boats. We also provide community training and in boat building and boating, and we organise lots of other maritime events, including Ocean the City, Cork Harbour Festival, the Dragon Boat Challenges, talks, workshops, and more. So this week we're presenting 3 different activities for Heritage Week and Cork Heritage Open Day. The first is a brand new audio heritage trail with Kieran McCarthy, local councillor and historian, on the bridges of Cork. I can send you links in the chat shortly if you're interested in checking that out. There's a second audio trail as well with Kieran on the marina. And then, of course, there's this evening's event with Jack O'Keefe on how to plan a CORKumnavigation. So to introduce Jack, Jack is a very loyal supporter of Meitheal Mara. He's involved in different programs and events, and he's been great to work with. He's a member of our Fiambara Longboat Club. He's also a very active member of Navoga Kirky, the Curragh Club in Cork, and he also runs the Irish Drascum Association, where he organises Drascum rallies around Ireland and beyond internationally. Before the talk today, I asked Jack, was there anything in particular that I should mention about him? And he kind of went quiet and he said, well, I did recently land on the Calf Rock, which he was quite proud about. So I said I'd just mention that. It's quite a feat, really. He landed in his dinghy, I think, off the Drascum. So I said I'd mention that. So Jack, although he's not originally from Cork, he probably holds the record number of CORKumnavigations. He heads out in his kayak most months when the tide is right and does a circuit, and also invites others to join him on his trip. This past year, this particular route has become very, very popular. There's probably been more people on it than ever before, and I'm really excited to have Jack with me today to explain the tricks of planning a CORKumnavigation and also to highlight some of the heritage sites along the way. So yeah, a big thanks to Jack for joining us today, and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Joya. I should emphasize that my landing on Calf Rock was optional and intended. So that's what makes it special. I don't know, Joya, now am I sharing the right screen?
You are,
do
yeah.
I need to do anything? Our guests are looking at St. Mary's Church and all the fishing boats lined up in front of it. Okay, so our emphasis this time is about the heritage, some of the heritage highlights on the CORKumnavigation route. However, the CORKumnavigation route has to be really discussed in context, and therefore I will go through some of the technical aspects as we go around the route. So in introducing the route, let me just emphasize that this is a leisurely thing. It's not the whitewater option. It's something suitable for families, for old men of 73 like myself, and for family outings. So the object of the exercise then is an easy passage with a minimum amount of portage, a minimum amount of waiting around in the cold for the tide to drop for passing bridges, and plenty of options for coffee. So what is the CORKumnavigation? This is taken from the excellent Meitheal Mara's guide, and there you see the outline of it. It's 7.5 kilometers long and normally takes between 2 and 3 hours. There are 33 bridges and 7 weirs. Most of them are in fact irrelevant. The ones that we need to worry about and that we'll talk about more are the Gillabi Weir, the Southgate Weir, Trinity Bridge beside the College of Caucum, Christy Ring Bridge beside the Opera House, and Sunday's Well Weir. These are what we refer to as tidal gates. In other words, there are times when the tide will allow passage through these features. You can see on this picture here that just downstream of Sunday's Well Weir, there's a track shown, and this will be of interest to us now because that's the mill race for the mills that were at Wise's distillery, just on the north end of Distillery Bridge. And then the south, you see the mill race that came down to the Gillabi Monastery, one of the 2 mills that were on Gillabi Monastery. So these are important features, and we can see each end of these mill races as we do our CORKumnavigation. The tools and equipment that we need are mainly the tide tables and the CORKumnavigation guide. And the CORKumnavigation guide gives the information that you need to plan your own route, and it tells you the clearance at each bridge or at and the level at which each weir covers, and also describes the Rule of Twelfths, which enables people to calculate what the level is going to be at different times of the tidal cycle. Now, tides are determined and described as tidal predictions, and that's what they are. They're predictions. They take only account the physics of the moon's pull on the earth and the sun's pull on the earth. They don't take account of the wind direction, which, as we know, particularly in Cork City, this has a critical effect, that easterly winds cause higher tides, and it doesn't take into account air pressure. The higher the air pressure over the city, then the lower the tide. Now, the next point that's critical to the CORKumnavigation is the operation of the split weir. That's the weir up beside the old waterworks. And when that weir actually diverts the lee down into the Sabhrann River, which is what we'll refer to as the South Channel. So you can see here on the picture on the right what the weir looks like when there's 300 cubic meters a second going over the dam. At that stage, the CORKumnavigation is really only suitable for very competent paddlers. Normally, and particularly for the last few months, there's been less than 25 cubic meters a second. And in recent times, the flow has been in the order of 6 to 10 cubic meters a second. And these flows are determined by the operation of the Inniscarra Dam. Now, the Inniscarra Dam issue the discharge plan. You can phone the number there, 021 487 1233. You hear a voice saying, if you know the number that the number of the office you're calling, please do so. And if you and then you pause and then you wait, and the next thing that happens is they say that for fishing information, press 1. And pressing 1 gives you the recording of the operator who says the date is such and such, and the planned discharges for the next 24 hours, next 48 hours, next whatever, are so many cubic meters a second. And then he'll say this can change without notice. The other way of finding out what's happening is to search Riverlee-hydrometric information. And there you get some very nice graphs of what the flow rate is through the dam at the particular moment in time and historically. That tells you what the flow rate at the split weir or waterworks weir will be in 3 hours time. And for a lot of us, that's just the job. Alternatively, you can use the Office of Public Works waterlevel.ie, and the gauge that's downstream of the dam is 19109. And if you consult that, then you can see whether the water is high or low relative to recently. Now, the ideal flow is about 10 cubic meters. That's a comfortable flow to make the full circuit. And if there's only 3 cubic meters and not a particularly high tide, it can be a bit of a struggle at the back of the Bonds Hospital. So which way to go, clockwise or anti-clockwise? Some of you will have seen this before. We'll be talking about anti-clockwise CORKum navigations, which are my personal preference, having done the clockwise ones for a while. One of the beauties of the clockwise navigation is that you don't have to do portage at the split weir. You can entertain yourself and everybody else by going through the gap in the split weir. But it does mean that you have an uphill climb, because let's face it, you have to get almost a meter above the high water, the mean high water level, to get up to the top side of the split weir. As anti-clockwise route, you will have the portage at the split weir, which is not a problem. We'll talk about it again. And you're coming downstream through the trees and pretty foliage in the South Channel. Now, we're back here. So when to start is the next question. Paddlers, we suggest generally that paddlers start at George's Quay or at Crosses Green. That's this area here. And the reason for that is to be able to get under under Trinity Bridge here before it closes, and out and around and up under Christy Bridge before it closes. And then you continue your route at leisure, targeting a crossing of Gillabi Weir at or about spring tide, or certainly at a level when the water level is more than 4.2 meters, as calculated by the tidal prediction for Cork City. You need to remember that the tidal prediction for Cork City is different from the tidal prediction for Cove, so you need to have the right tables to make sure that you can get the right time. Now, rowers will generally come up from the Port of Cork and make their circuit. They can leave as early as they like, as long as they leave plenty of time to get under Christy Bridge. And then you can dilly-dally up past the Mercy Hospital, come around over the Gillabi Weir at high tide, and lo and behold, Trinity Bridge will be closed, usually for about an hour or an hour and a half. However, there's convenient hostelries here, there's Cushnans, and there's Sober Lane, so all is not lost. Here's another graphic that shows really how the route is. We're starting at the waterworks, we're going down past Cork, Crosses Green, Port of Cork, past the Mardyke and back up to the waterworks again. So we have this shoaly zone here, which is actually above the high water. We've the Gillabi Weir, we need to have clearance there, and the minimum tide there is 4.2. And then we have the Southgate Weir, which becomes relevant because we need to have the tide low enough to get under, I see I've lost the label, which is Trinity Bridge. And so that if the tides are very big, there's only 0.8 of a meter between the clearance for the Southgate Weir and clearing the Trinity Bridge. And if the tide is very big, that leaves only an hour or so between your earliest start time and your latest passage under Trinity Bridge time. Next bridges are Clontarf Bridge. There's only a few centimeters between Trinity Bridge and Clontarf Bridge, and then you need to get around to Christy Ring Bridge, which, although it's well higher than Trinity Bridge, it takes half an hour or a bit more. And if it's a big tide, you don't want to be hanging around. You need to get to Christy Ring Bridge fairly quickly.
Jack,
yep.
just on those bridges, would you just explain a little bit where those bridges are, just for those who don't know the names of the bridges?
I will indeed. Okay, so the main features, Trinity Bridge, also known as what?
By the College of Commerce?
The College of Com Bridge, and by the Cork Wags as the Passover, because it was opened by Mayor Goldberg. Now, Southgate Bridge is just here, just after Crosses Green. Then we come around, and the next one that we worry about, that I worry about, is Christy Ring Bridge, which is beside the Opera House.
Yeah.
And then we've Sunday's Well Weir, which is just above Sunday's Well Bridge by amazing coincidence. And those are the ones. On a very high tide, you might have to stoop going under one of the Lancaster bridges. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, I don't have pictures of those bridges. Right. So there is the rule of twelfths, and this is an example of how we can calculate it. You can do sums using the guide. You see there how the guide shows the limits for Trinity Footbridge, and you can use an app like Navionics, which actually shows the tidal curve. So you can determine then when it's safe to go through. The Navionics varies very slightly from the Hydrographic Office predictions, but it's not material to your choices. I would suggest that people don't take any chances with the rising tide under the bridges. Some of the bridges, particularly the one at the Opera House, Christy Ring Bridge, they have a flange at each side. So it is possible to get stuck under the bridge, which would not be nice. Okay, so what sort of boats can we use on it? And these are the collection. It's pretty well anything, as long as it's portable. And even after last year, now even no boat. Ned Dennison leads, organizes a swim now each year as part of the Cork Harbour Festival. And for last year it was 1 swimmer, this year it's 4 swimmers. Next year he has ambitions that it'll be a lot of swimmers. So that's as far as the type of boat is concerned. The top left there is a Rankin sailing dinghy, and it's been motored under, I think that's Christy Ring Bridge. How fit do you need to be? It's as well to be flexible to get under the likes of Trinity Bridge if you've arrived late. You'd want to be able to do 2 hours steady paddling. You want to be able to disembark at steps or at a weir. You want to be able to disembark at a ladder. You want to be able to lift your boat out and carry it up and over the weir. You'll usually have company to help you. And you want to be able to maintain 6 kilometers an hour for, say, 15 minutes if the current is, anyway, strong. And you want to be able to avoid obstacles, and obstacles includes other boats, other kayakers. So there's a limit, a degree of fitness and a degree of experience that's required. Now, I've plenty of experience and I have plenty of years. I'm not a young man, but I've never found it a bother. Okay, so let's do the CORKumnavigation then. You can see there the slipway at Crosses Green, and that's where we generally start the paddlers on the accompanied trips. When I say accompanied trips, that I or another person would invite persons known and unknown to take the circuit for the experience and for the company. There's a flood barrier there that it can be opened by arrangement, and that's the handy place to start. It's also possible to start down at George's Quay, where there's plenty of steps and you're still on the right side of Trinity Bridge. It's the purist in me that says that you should go under each of the bridges to complete the circuit. It would make sense to start below Trinity Bridge and then come on around and haul out above Trinity Bridge. That would be an easy thing to do. Now, Crosses Green gets its name from a high cross that was erected on a monastery overlooking that area. So, just like Crosshaven was named by as a result of a cross that was raised to respect St. John. This area was called St. Dominic's Island, and all the streams around this area were harnessed at different times for water power. And the earliest mills probably supplied the student population who attended the monastic school connected with St. Finbar. Finbar himself, returning from overseas, probably landed hereabouts at Proby's Quay, because navigation further up the river from this point would never have been a real option. The mills functioned here for over 1,000 years, and amongst the last to operate was Hart Sawmill. One 18th century print shows a boat, a bit like a Galway hooker, a sailing craft, lying on the stones over where the brewery used to be, and there's a raft of timber on the water waiting to be attended to at the sawmill. So here we have a bit of the wonderful Elizabeth Fort and the also wonderful Finbar's Cathedral, and you can see here the tail race coming from the mill that was powered from the Gillabi Weir. This area on our left is Kaiser's Hill, and it's nothing to do with the Kaiser or the King, but it's actually to do with the quays. And the quays here served the old monastery, and it also acted as a boundary between the native Irish and the Hiberno Norse within the main part of the city. The walls of Elizabeth Fort, or Dunbehi na Muirche, was built to overawe the citizens of Cork. And this was built in around 1600 when the citizens of Cork began to develop opinions of their own. And this had the main garrison of English soldiers from then up on for 200 years, up until the time of Napoleon. The fort was built on the church of St. Mary de Nard, and otherwise known as Aglish Crochanach, or the Church of the Cross, because of the high cross that I'd mentioned earlier. Now, the Southgate Weir is what really determines the starting time for the paddler's route. You can see it here, it looks pretty tame. Sometimes you have to delay at the Southgate Weir because there's too much flow and the step gets a bit whitewatery for the likes of me. So at this weir does help to retain a certain depth of water above it at low tide, but its effect doesn't go up even as far as Clark's Bridge. The weir must have been built in the early 19th century because the old prints of this area show it as a stony river in low tide with the local women doing their washing. The south banks are called French's and Proby's Quay, with interesting place names in the middle. This is called Kaiser's Hill, and as I mentioned, that this really means the way to the quays. So there's a few Scandinavian place names around the city, such as Skiddy, meaning a shooter, and there's the Cotterson's Lane and former Golden Castle, which are near Paradise Place at the Raven. And the significance of the Raven for the Vikings used ravens for navigation, and I don't know how or why, but the Viking flags and banners very often had the raven shown on them. So this is the Southgate Bridge. The companions are ready to go on their roundabout, and it reckons that this bridge, we don't have great records because of two fires that happened, and but it's reckoned that this bridge was built in the 19th century, and that at one stage there was a British man of war which came up, that would have been in the 1600s, that came up here to stop the citizens of Cork from developing their own opinions. Now, this one is Parliament Bridge, and beside it is Union Quay. And Parliament Bridge and Union Quay were named to celebrate the end of Grattan's Parliament, which was a fantastic sellout by the landowners and people in Ireland who had a vote. They were bribed effectively to get rid of Grattan's Parliament, which had done a lot to improve conditions for the subjects of the Crown resident in Ireland. There is a old weir just upstream of this bridge. It's a wooden weir, which I've always been a bit curious about, and it's not known when it was built, but certainly I'm just reminded that it was in 1690 that the man of war sailed up to bombard the city walls during the siege. Okay, so on we go, and we've gone through Trinity Bridge, which we discussed earlier, and that is, Trinity Bridge is the lowest bridge on the circuit, and the prospect of getting it raised is not great because it's not only a bridge for pedestrians, but I'm told that the power and other services for Morrison's Island go through that bridge, so nobody's inclined to interfere with the bridge at all. Next, we're coming to one of a pair of bridges, Brian-Boru Bridge and Clontarf Bridge. This particular one here is Clontarf Bridge. It's on the Sabhrann, And the photograph that I have there up in the top left is of Brian Brew Bridge. They were railway bridges that were built with the same construction. And I remember myself the counterweight and the quarter circular gearing that was there to lift the bridge. So that's not gone so very long. For the kayakers, those bridges are a little bit tricky because there are diagonals underneath the bridge that can surprise you. You might think that you'll easily get through, but then the diagonals can catch you. And also for rowers in particular, you need to aim carefully because the 3 beams that you can see under the bridge, they have studs on them and very painful. So we come down then to the confluence of the Sabhrann and the Lee, what we refer to as the Porter Cork. And as you can see, this photograph was taken during one of the swims. And these buildings here in the background are the bonded stores. And they are technologically quite interesting insofar as their purpose, apart from holding spirits until the duty was paid on them, they had to guarantee constant temperature. So there's arrangements for ventilation, and also there's elevators inside there to bring the material from the different stores one above the other. And to my eye, even though it's a bit disheveled now, I think these are a beautiful building and technically quite fascinating. I was fortunate enough to get into one during one of these heritage weeks when it was open. We come down in front of the Porter Cork, and throughout the circuit you can enjoy nature, especially down this area. We don't seem to have the big seal anymore, but there's a small seal that's been seen going around. And lately, I think if you went with a butterfly net, the salmon are jumping in such great numbers that you'd have a chance of even catching one. But there's a lot of natural activity in this part of the city. So we head on up under Michael Collins Bridge, and then we come to a relatively new structure, Patrick's Bridge. And of course, before Patrick's Bridge was built, the lighters could sail up as far as Patrick Street, which at that time then was in fact a quay. In 1799, we can see from a print that the northern end of Patrick's Bridge, where it has Neptune's face, was a drawbridge. Okay, so the area down on the left flank was known as Glan Coton, and this comes from the cots, or the small flat bottom boats that would have been used in the shallow marshy area for shell fishing and such like. So the North Mall, and the North Mall from the river, you can think that it's a little bit boring, that all you're doing is watching out for outfalls, but it has a couple of important features. It once contained a monastery and church and other properties of the Franciscans, hence I suppose the Franciscan well, and it was a great center of learning, and was referred to as being the Mirror of Ireland. It housed monks from both native and from Norman extraction, and relations between the two groups weren't always harmonious. And at one stage, conflict arose, which led to a complaint being sent to Rome. We don't know the actual score on the conflict, but the total number of dead amounted to 22. So maybe that's the real reason why it was referred to as the Mirror of Ireland. It was in this monastery that Meitheal O'Clery, one of the four masters, copied one of our most important manuscripts, The Life of St. Finbar. The monastery was established here between the cliff and the river for an ulterior motive, as was often the case with these monasteries, particularly the likes of Clonmacnoise. The main route from the north came down through Gowanus-Burra, which is now known as Shandon Street, and along North Mall. And that meant, and up to the fords that we'll discuss later, the fords around the Mercy Hospital, known as Bealach Conglish, are the way of the Greyhound. So the monastery could control traffic, and this was a great thing, and I would think myself was probably a grand source of revenue. A lot of the bridges that were built in this area were timber. They were only built of stone after the floods washed everything away in the 17th century. It's hard to imagine that the Coal Quay, which on the left here, was actually a navigable channel, but it was indeed the case. And the old wine transporting ships, the name will come to me, Cobbs, is it? Would come up there, and they'd use the cogs, would use the flow of fresh water to get in as far as Dawn Square, which is now Dawn Square, which is where wine generally would be unloaded. These cogs were a deep hull round vessel, and they were very popular within the Hanseatic cities. They, I suppose, had a good chance of reaching their destination, and they also carried an efficient cargo weight. There are good coffee stops with steps at each end of Shandon Bridge. There's Mayo's, and there's on the one side, and there's an Shoppabeog on the other side. So this is a good break or a mustering spot for rowers making an early passage under Christy Ring Bridge at the Opera House. So we'll go up there, and it's a pleasant place to sit, and good coffee. So we come up to the Maltings, which is a very interesting area. It's in a way the place where the river meets the tide, and very often this forms a place where the shipping terminates. Now, this would be known as a pill, such as in Pilltown on the River Suir. But the bridge that we're looking at there is the Distillery Bridge, and just to the right of that is Boole's house, Professor Boole. I see we're at 22, better hurry up. On the next picture, just on the south side, you can see there the original mansion house. And this house was probably located there for the reason of supervising the ford, which would have been a very important ford, Bealach on Congyara. So then also there's the Maltings building itself, which is at the bottom, and that Maltings building still has the timber supports in front of it where the barges used to sit as the grain was lifted up in through the doors on the side of the building for spreading and for malting. The timbers were laid down to protect the barges from rough stones. Right, so the next feature that we want to talk about is Sunday is the Sunday's Well Weir. Now, Sunday's Well Weir is a bit tricky. Going upriver from left to right, it's important that you kayak or row under the trees on the tennis club side. Swimmers will prefer to take the flume on the Sunday's Well side because it's deeper, but there isn't enough width there between the concrete remains of the old flume or the remains of the old fish pass. There isn't enough room there for a kayak or for a boat, really. So the best thing and important thing, in my view, is to stick to the tennis club side as close as possible. Now, this was the location of an inclined plane in the Cork exhibition of 1903, and this here is a print, an image of the exhibition. The exhibition was, you know, like the great exhibitions showing the wonders of Ireland and the industry and the agriculture and the culture, and you can see the range of craft that are messing around there. There's something from all different countries there, and this wasn't only on the occasion of the great exhibition that happened. On the right hand side there you can see the end of the inclined plane, and by the way, thanks to Cork City Museum for this image. And there's a photograph of the inclined plane in operation. It'd be fantastic to restore that, but I can't imagine the health and safety or others going for it. Having said that, I suppose some of the you know, rides that you see in fairgrounds and things like that would be the equal to it. On the bottom right now, you see the boat, the Shamrock, and this, and I can't tell for sure how it's driven, but what I draw your attention to are the military gear. I think this must be an outing for the mayor and the nobility, but also note the range of boats that are fooling around on the water. This would have been the case until 1950, when the power plant was set up. And in 1950, boating in this part of the river was banned. I don't know that the ban was ever lifted, and frankly, I don't care. So we'll move up now to the Mardyke, and the Mardyke, it comes from the time that we had great trade and Dutch community here. A lot of the bricks that built Cork came from Holland as ballast, and the Dutch community here used their skills to build the Mardyke, or sea dyke, or sea wall, which now gives us the name. And here we're at the Shaky Bridge, which was built by Daly, who used to operate a ferry across there, and he was a rich merchant and a bit of a philanthropist, and he built the bridge. The wags would say that it was so the gentlefolk of Sunday's Well could get across to watch the rugby matches that were in the Mardyke at the time. This was in 1927. Just where the bridge is on the Sunday's Well side, there was a house known as G Maps, which was a meeting house for the 1798 activists. All up along here, there's great nature. I've seen kingfishers, otters. It's really lovely. So then we come up under Thomas Davis Bridge, commonly known as Wellington Bridge. And you want to take the North Arch on Wellington Bridge because there's a lot of debris under the other arches. And when you come up in your kayak or your boat, I recommend that you come up this channel here, even though there might be a little more flow on it, and land just beside this tree where there's a sort of a concrete beach. And then it's an easy portage, I find, from there up and over, and there's another gravel beach here. So you're less likely to fall into deep water or step on anything hard or rough. This here is a pondweed. It's quite fine and deep. In very strong flows, you can make a portage here up by the monument to the fishermen, and then carry your boat around and launch it just here at the back of the Kingsley Hotel. Now, what we're looking at here now is the diversion of the River Lee into the Sound. And it's not sure when this happened, but it certainly happened. It's recorded in 1199 as having been the case. So the weir, which was known as the Caucum, it diverted the water down for the holy monks of Gillabi to run their mills, and for the mills operating down near Crosses Green. You can't see too much of the waterworks here itself, but there is nice architecture, and it's an interesting afternoon to see what's been conserved of the machinery. We come down past O'Neill-Crowley Bridge, also known as Victoria Bridge. This is named after another patriot of the Fenian Bridge. Right, now, after O'Neill-Crowley Bridge, there are shows which are above the mean high water spring tides, and they depend on flow from the dam for easy passage. Also, the Sabhrann can get somewhat overgrown during the summer, and if there's a decent flow, paddlers need to keep a bit more than social distance. You know, we've had experience of paddlers knocking each other over because one gets caught in a tree and gets rolled over, and then that causes a domino effect. Rowers should turn their boats around and reverse down through any restricted areas if there's a flow. That way you can control or stop the boat if it's heading towards something nasty. This is the old Cork jail, where the inmates were often incarcerated for no other reason than that they couldn't speak English. If you couldn't defend yourself in English, then you were presumed guilty, and they must have had plenty of places in the prisons. But it's lovely stonework, and we must appreciate and enjoy that. The Glucksman is built on the site of one of the mills operated by the monastery. And but the river has changed a lot here over the years. There were high limestone cliffs at this particular point, and somewhere on the top of those cliffs stood the Gillabi Monastery. Now, the monastery was closed at the Reformation and fell into disrepair, and so the stones were taken and people continued to take rock from there, so it all ended up in a huge quarry. Now, the quarry extends right back to where the university is at the moment. Amongst the casualties of all these excavations was the cave Barra, which was a place that Finbar liked to meditate. And it was described in 1644 by a French author, with, you know, many wonders how it was a long, long cave. And apparently on the front of the cave, there was a rock in the shape of a hound. And the cave was referred to in a saga that meant that the greyhound went from Baltinglass, which was Ballochonglish in County Wicklow, and came down and had adventures and ended up in Cork in Uachconglish, which is the cave of the greyhound. Right, so moving on, and the next thing that we need to worry about, this is the Gillabi Weir, and the Gillabi Weir is the highest weir on the route. It's the Gillabi Weir that determines that you must have at least 4.2 meters to make the CORKumnavigation. So a few cautions on this is that as the water goes over the weir, it diverts to the north. In other words, you can be kayaking down here quite nicely, and then suddenly you're being dragged across and towards this bank. Now, that's important because there are some rather impolite bits of metal sticking out of this bank. So you want to come across nearer the middle of the weir. There is an area that you could portage. I've never done it, but I'm told that it's simple and straightforward. Now we come around the corner after the Gillabi Weir, and we see this two of these objects outside the River Lee Hotel. The hotel was built on the site of the Muskerry Tramway railway yard, and there's a couple of rail track pieces sticking out underneath the hotel at this point. This was the support for one of the bridges. The light railway served a lot of West Cork, including Barney, Coachford and Dunamore, but only the two piers of the bridge taking it over the Western Road really remain to show that it existed. Now, the Clark's Bridge is one of the oldest bridges of its type. It fascinates me because you see where the keystone is, it's extremely flat, and you know, we're not shy about driving over it in our heavy vans and things like that, but I do wonder. It has a number of features that indicate its age, you know, the way that it's a sort of a slaty stone that's being used here. Beside it is a place called Ilan na Mulchain, which means Owl Island, for obvious reasons. So then we come around the corner and we're at Meitheal Mara, and we're back at Crosses Green. The rowers can carry on down to George's Quay. There's fine steps there. It's just a bit of a climb over a railing, and as I said earlier, there you can while away the hour that you'll need for the tide to drop below Trinity Bridge here in the distance, in Callanan's or at the coffee shop or Sober Lane or wherever takes your fancy. These people are suspicious people, and they're afraid that somebody will interfere with their boats. I've often left boats here, and as long as you're sensible on how you tie it up, not to make it too easy, I really wouldn't be worried about it. It's a very public place. So, as Joy has mentioned, I do have a calendar in the Facebook page when I plan to go. I don't always go when I plan to go, but if I don't, somebody else goes, to coordinate the opening of the barrier and to, know what's going on. But these are not a commercial or a formal event. It's like somebody saying, I'm going for a walk in the park. Anybody wants to come, and we'll talk about it or whatever else. And the circuit is a public area. You don't need a permit. You don't need a license yet. I'm afraid even to mention it, because somebody will get the idea that they can make some money out of it. And the outings are what we would refer to as peer paddles. Each person is there on their own resources and at their own risk. Nobody's going to be minding you. Be able to look after yourself. Now, people have got into difficulties and they've always received help, but you don't count on it and we don't promise it. And the next time that we're going out, by amazing coincidence, is next Saturday, the 21st of August. There'll be kayaks launching at 3:30 and Crosses Green, and don't be late because it's a 4.4 meter tide. So you don't want to be hanging around. You want to be under Christy Ring Bridge at 4 o'clock. The rowing boats, and the intention is to start at Chandon Boat Club to be at Christy Ring Bridge by 4 o'clock. You can always get information on the CORKumnavigation Facebook page, and that's where plans are. And sometimes we have additional outings. We had lovely outings up to Glanmire and various others that happened. So I have to say a big thanks to Cian O'Shea, because almost all of what I know about the heritage comes from him. I'm a bluffer, I admit it. You'll have figured that out by now. And also that Meitheal Mara and the late Donal Lynch, they had the vision to do the survey to enable people to do this circuit, and they prepared the guide. And every time I go out and invite a group, I'm in touch with the ESB, and they always do as they can. It's not their primary purpose or objective to make the river navigable. They have to keep a minimum flow, and the next objective that they have, since a change in the legislation a few years ago, is to minimize the risk of flooding. And then their third objective is to make electricity, and they don't do a lot of the latter. In Inniscarra, I should say. And the paddlers and rowers, people who go out there, I'm a great believer in the use it or lose it principle. Because if we don't use it, we'll have more Trinity Bridges, and it'll be a loss for us and for the future generations who rightly should not forgive us. I put in these 3 pictures. It's not only about daylight, to paddle on the Lee in the dusk, or for darkness into light is a wonderful thing. It's particularly beautiful, even though it may be a bit artificial. Okay, so thank you very much. That is it. And oh, what an amazing coincidence. It's 8 o'clock.
Well done, Jack. That's amazing timekeeping, and thank you so much for another really interesting talk. We did a CORKumnavigation talk before, and it was great to see more of the heritage and history highlights along the way in this presentation. So thank you very much. A few thanks there as well from our people in the audience. We had a good few watching on Facebook as well. No real questions, but one thing I did want to ask you is just for those, because there's quite a lot of technical information in terms of planning your trip. what are, again, the critical things to be mindful of when you want to do a CORKumnavigation? I'm thinking of the tidal height and the critical bridges and weirs. Could you just recap that?
Certainly. I certainly will. Excuse me a second. Okay, so the first thing to do when you want to plan a CORKumnavigation is to check what the flow is from the dam. If the flow is 300 cubic meters, are going to be 300 cubic meters, you know, unless you want a whitewater ride, don't do it. I have done it with others at 300 cubic meters. I wouldn't like to do it with more than 4 or 5 people. And, you know, you can't walk over the split weir at that sort of level as we saw earlier. So the first thing is find out what they're doing at the dam. And you can do that by ringing the number or by checking on the OPW website.
And that has all to do with rainfall. So the rainfall that's predicted and the rainfall that has been, I suppose.
Yeah, like if there's rainstorms predicted, the guys will release water. And that's part of managing the upstream lakes. The next thing is to know when the Trinity Bridge closes, right? And the Trinity Bridge, as a general rule, will close on the sort of tides that we're talking about 90 minutes before and after high tide.
Right.
Okay. The next one to worry about is Christy Ring Bridge. And Christy Ring Bridge, generally on the tides that we're talking about, will close an hour each side.
So that's the College of Commerce Bridge, basically, and the Cork Opera House Bridge. For
Cork
those
Opera House Bridge, yeah. Yeah, like I'm afraid my technical background demands that I name things not by how they're called, but by how they're named. And since I'm called Jack and my name is John, that's a bit hypocritical. The next thing to worry about, or not to worry about, but to manage your trip on, is the Gillabi Weir. And for that, really every time, the best thing that you want to do is to be going over that at high tide. And the reason for that is twofold. It's the highest weir, but if you're going over the Gillabi Weir at high tide, then you have a good high amount of water in the shallow upstream area, you know, around the Bonds, Secure Hospital and places like that. So really, you know, there's those few things that you need to know. You need to know the time and the height of the tide and the flow from the dam.
And the optimum tidal height on that day should be in and around 4.2, am I right?
That's the minimum tidal height.
Okay, so it could
be
4.2, 4.3, 4.4.
Yeah, and
4.6 and 8 kind of gets tricky again, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the amount of time that you have under the bridges is getting less and less.
Right.
Yeah. You know, but for the really big tides, they can be a lot of fun because you have more water up in the, you know, up past the Glucksman and in that area there, in the section and the artificial channel between the Lee and the Samhain.
Yeah, very good. That's great, Jack. I actually saw a question here from Thomas. He's asking, is it possible to do it on a sit-on-top kayak?
That's the weapon of choice for most people. You know, if you look at the crowd photos, I don't know if you even have any, like there's, you know, sit on top, that's actually a sit on top there. This is a sit on top. Yeah, so
I don't have your presentation up sharing anymore.
all right, okay. Yeah, that the vast majority are sit on top.
Another question from James: what do people do about parking cars?
Well, I prefer to try and schedule the event for a Sunday, and that means that there's plenty of parking. You can get parking on French's Quay and on Crosses Green and around by St. Al's. There's also the city centre car park. It's possible you have an option to drive around and unload your gear and then deposit your car at the city centre car park, and then it's a short stroll back to your boat.
Very good. One last question here. Somebody's asking whether a 17-feet open aluminium would work.
Aluminium boat?
It might be a rowing boat, I imagine. Not so fast, they're saying.
I don't see why not.
A canoe, actually, is what I'm told.
It's a canoe. Okay, so it's like an Indian canoe, a Canadian canoe style.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's a canoe, aluminium.
Yeah, yeah. Look, the determining criteria is, can you lift it over the split weir? If you can lift it over the split weir, then and move at 6 kilometers an hour, that's 3 knots. You know, it's not a great speed for a short period of time. Then that's all you need to be able to do.
Brilliant. That's great. Sally is asking, okay, I'm going to take one last question. How much experience in reality is required to do the trip, Jack?
Well, in terms of experience, right, you can be in deep water. You should be able to recover from falling out of the boat.
Yeah.
You should be able to, as I say, maintain an amount of speed and for 15 minutes or so, and to be able to avoid obstacles. Yeah, it's not. Certainly, I wouldn't approve of somebody doing it as their first outing in a kayak or a paddling boat. You know, you'd want to have been out and done some, paddling around on a river or at the sea before. Maybe, I'd say if you had, what would 20 hours? Do you think that would be a reasonable amount of experience?
Yeah, something like that, I would say. I mean, I suppose the things to remember is, you know, don't ever go out on your own. You know,
Yeah.
if you are going, go accompanied. If you aren't entirely confident of your experience or skill, go with somebody who is, you know, experienced and skilled. Don't take any chances. But it isn't a technically difficult paddle, you know, in its essence, but you do need to know at what point to time it. That's the trickiest part.
Absolutely. I couldn't put it better myself.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up, folks. Thank you, Jack, once again for a great talk. For those of you who would like to watch it back, we'll have it on the meithealmara.ie website next week, Tuesday. We've got it on Facebook as well, so you'll be able to watch it back. I mentioned the CORKumnavigation Facebook group in the chat, so you should be able to find that if you want to join Jack and other people paddling and rowing next weekend. And for those of you who want to learn more about the bridges of Cork, do check out the audio trail that we launched today with local historian Councillor Kieran McCarthy. It's on our website again, and I put the link in the chat. And thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks again, Jack, for joining us. It was great, and we'll see you next time.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, Emil.
Thank you.